Okay. I got interested in irrigation in 1967. In those days, it was very inefficient. A lot of water was wasted, and there was a tremendous amount of runoff into the rivers, which polluted and contaminated lots. And I was concerned about it. Well, eventually, I got involved in micro irrigation, which at that time, 1979, was right in its infancy. We'd had a real bad drought, and it made people interested in how to conserve water so that they could get their crops in with the minimal amount of water to use. So I was hired by a company to run a small irrigation business and sent to California to design schools by some of the finest designers that the Israelis at that time had. We did classes on hydraulics and management and how to properly fertilize plants. So it was a real deal compared to any other irrigation stuff that was around. This was the high end of irrigation. My first real big customer was Leslie Roy Farms. Leslie was as advanced as you could imagine. He was a young man at the time, a few years younger than me, and was interested in doing the best job he possibly could of actually business farming. And he looked at what it was going to cost to do it, and he looked at the possible benefits, and he had faith in me and said, let's do it. So we started out with hops. Hops at that time, they were using 42 inches of water a year to irrigate an acre of hops. It's a lot of water. By careful management, Leslie was able to take that number down to 17 inches, which was under half by some of what he was using before. He cut his fertilizer costs in half. His management of the land went down because he didn't have all the weed growth. Production of his crop went up, and the quality of the crop went up. So he was one of the best producers of hops in the nation. Well, Leslie was one of those very progressive guys that decided he wanted to have absolute control of all the things that he was capable of as far as irrigation and fertilizer, which fertilizer costs were pretty expensive in those days. He was able to cut his fertilizer costs in half by careful management. So it meant that where maybe before it was costing him $500 an acre, he cut that cost down to maybe $250 to $300 an acre. So that was just extra profit. Without even producing more crop, he was able to make more money. I did probably 1,000 acres with Leslie, and then I got into something called micro spray irrigation, which was a very low pressure, low output irrigation for orchards. Same kind of results. Cut the water usage by a bunch, cut the fertilizer costs by a bunch, management practices by a bunch, and product quality went up considerably. People in those days used to say, well, it's only good for so many years, and then you're going to have to put a different sprinkler system in, and that was never the case. If it was run correctly, that system would last, and I have had systems out there since 1981, and that's 30-some years, that are functioning just as good now as they did when I sold them. So if people listen to me, and that was one of the things that I was concerned with, is I wanted people to manage the product. Because if they didn't manage it well, it was going to look like I'd failed. I had lied to them about it, and that's not what I wanted. So I was very careful about who I sold material to. Okay?